Hollywood has always been loud about its stars. Big debuts, bigger headlines, even bigger expectations. But every so often, a different kind of presence emerges, one that doesn't demand attention, yet commands it. A performer who changes the landscape not through excess, but through quiet conviction. Jasonscottlee arrived at a time when Asian faces in leading roles were rare, and meaningful representation was even rarer. The industry didn't know what to do with him, but audiences did. They saw strength without caricature, discipline without arrogance. A leading man defined by depth, not novelty. He wasn't positioned as a trend. He became a turning point. Through physical storytelling, cultural responsibility, and deliberate choices, Lee built a career that resisted shortcuts and rejected stereotypes. His journey wasn't about visibility alone. It was about dignity, intention, and legacy. This is not the story of constant fame. It's the story of impact. And this is Cinema Uncovered, revealing the power of the actors who changed cinema without ever chasing its spotlight. Jasonscottlee was born on November 19, 1966, in Los Angeles, but it was the islands of Hawaii that truly shaped him. Growing up surrounded by the Pacific Ocean, lush landscapes, and a vibrant mix of cultures, Lee learned early the importance of community, respect, and identity. His upbringing gave him a perspective that many young actors in Hollywood never experience, an understanding that life, movement, and self-expression are intertwined with the world around you. From a young age, Lee was drawn to physical disciplines, martial arts, swimming, surfing, and various forms of athletic training were not hobbies, but part of his daily life. They taught him discipline, balance, and patience, and helped him develop a strong sense of presence, a quality that would later define his performances on screen. He understood early on that being a compelling actor was not just about memorizing lines. It was about how a body moves, how silence can communicate emotion, and how authenticity can resonate more than spectacle. Lee also developed a love for storytelling. He would watch films and performances not merely for entertainment, but to study character, movement, and narrative. He was captivated by the ways in which actors could inhabit a role completely, transforming themselves physically and emotionally to tell a story. This curiosity extended to martial arts philosophy as well. He studied discipline, focus, and the mental aspect of training, learning lessons that would later influence his approach to acting and role preparation. Before Hollywood came calling, Lee had already established a foundation of intentionality and resilience. Unlike many young actors, he was not chasing fame or recognition. Instead, he was quietly preparing for a career that would be defined by authenticity, integrity, and cultural significance. Every choice, every step, every training session was laying the groundwork for a path that would later make him not only a leading man, but a cultural trailblazer. In Hawaii, Jasonscottlee learned lessons that would follow him throughout his career. Strength is earned, presence is cultivated, and true storytelling comes from a place of understanding, not imitation. In 1993, Jasonscottlee's career reached a pivotal moment when he was cast as Bruce Lee in Dragon, the Bruce Lee story. This was not just another role. It was a responsibility of immense weight. Bruce Lee was more than a martial arts legend or a Hollywood star. He was a global icon, a philosopher, and a symbol of cultural pride and representation. Portraying him required accuracy, respect, and deep understanding, and Lee approached it with unwavering commitment. Though physically capable, Lee was not a lifelong martial artist. To honor Bruce Lee's legacy, he underwent intensive martial arts training, studying Jeet Kune Do principles, fighting techniques, and Bruce's philosophy of movement. But Lee's preparation went beyond physicality. He studied Bruce Lee's life, his struggles, his ambitions, and his humanity. The goal was never imitation. It was embodiment of spirit. He sought to capture the vulnerability, humor, determination, and discipline that made Bruce Lee more than a legend. The project carried scrutiny from every corner. Bruce Lee's widow, Linda Lee Cadwell, was closely involved and supported Lee's casting, acknowledging the actor's dedication to authenticity. Critics and audiences alike noticed the result: a performance that balanced intense physicality with emotional depth, portraying Bruce Lee not as a myth, but as a real, relatable man navigating personal and professional challenges. Dragon, the Bruce Lee story, became a defining moment for Lee. It introduced him to a global audience and established him as a leading man capable of carrying a major Hollywood film. But beyond fame, the role carried cultural significance. Lee became a visible Asian hero in an era when representation was scarce, showing that an Asian actor could embody strength, nuance, and humanity on a mainstream stage. For Jasonscottlee, the role was more than career-defining. It was formative. It reinforced the lessons of his youth in Hawaii. Discipline, authenticity, and presence are the foundations of true performance. From this point forward, every role he would choose, whether in blockbuster studios or smaller independent projects, would reflect the care, intentionality, and respect he brought to portraying Bruce Lee. Dragon wasn't just a breakthrough. It was a declaration. Jasonscottlee had arrived, not as a fleeting star, but as an actor with purpose, skill, and cultural resonance. Following the critical success of Dragon, the Bruce Lee story, Lee could have taken the traditional Hollywood trajectory, sequels, blockbusters, or typecast roles. Instead, in 1994, he stepped into a role that was very different yet equally defining. Mowgli in Disney's live-action adaptation of The Jungle Book. Unlike Bruce Lee, Mowgli was a fictional character, but bringing him to life required a combination of athleticism, emotional depth, and grounded physical presence. Lee wasn't just running through a jungle set. He embodied the boy who grew up among wolves, facing fear, friendship, and self-discovery. His movement had to feel natural, instinctive, and believable, a reflection of his physical training and understanding of the body as a storytelling tool. This role was significant on multiple levels. At the time, Asian actors rarely led major Hollywood productions, particularly in adventure films aimed at a global audience. By carrying a high-profile Disney project on his shoulders, Lee demonstrated that authenticity and skill could resonate with millions without relying on stereotypes or gimmicks. His Mowgli was strong, human, and relatable, a hero who inspired without shouting and led without spectacle. Around the same time, Lee also took on Rapa Nui 1994, a historical drama set on Easter Island. He played the young Polynesian warrior Maku, navigating cultural traditions, spiritual beliefs, and societal conflict. The role was physically demanding, including swordplay, environmental challenges, and choreographed stunts, but also required emotional depth, a young man facing loyalty, leadership, and love under extreme circumstances. This was a departure from Hollywood formulas, reflecting Lee's consistent choice to pursue meaningful, culturally significant stories rather than purely commercial projects. During the mid-1990s, Lee also explored television and smaller independent projects, often turning down roles that felt stereotypical or shallow. Each choice reinforced his philosophy. He was not interested in visibility for its own sake. He was interested in presence, depth, and impact. By the end of this period, Jasonscottlee had established a pattern that would define his career. He could lead big films and carry commercial projects, but he would always choose roles with intention, whether that meant honoring cultural legacy, exploring human complexity, or challenging himself physically and emotionally. Mowgli and Maku were more than characters. They were early markers of Lee's unique path in Hollywood, a path that combined heroism, authenticity, and cultural resonance, setting him apart from his peers and proving that representation could be both nuanced and compelling. Beyond Rapa Nui, Lee gravitated toward independent films, international productions, and culturally significant stories, often stepping away from Hollywood's commercial spotlight. He appeared in films like Soldier of Fortune, 1993, and Map of the Human Heart, 1993, where he explored complex characters and moral ambiguity. These projects may not have been blockbuster hits, but they allowed him to expand his craft and explore roles rarely offered to Asian actors at the time. Lee's career choices during this period reflected a deliberate philosophy. Visibility without meaning was not enough. He sought roles that resonated, that challenged him physically and emotionally, and that honored the cultures and stories he represented. He often turned down projects that felt superficial or relied on cliches, choosing instead to build a body of work defined by authenticity and depth. This path was not without risk. By prioritizing meaningful work over commercial gain, Lee sometimes stepped away from mainstream attention, but it was a choice that would define his legacy, an actor who led by example, showing that representation, discipline, and integrity matter as much as fame or box office numbers. During this phase of his career, Jasonscottlee was quietly reshaping the narrative for Asian leading men in Hollywood. He proved that a performer could succeed on his own terms, breaking stereotypes while demonstrating that a career built on purpose and craft can leave a lasting impact. Years after his early successes in the 1990s, Jasonscottlee returned to the global stage with Disney's live-action Mulan in 2020, portraying Khan, a seasoned warrior defined by honor, loyalty, and the burdens of loss. Unlike his earlier roles as Mowgli or Bruce Lee, Khan was not a young hero discovering himself. He was a complex antagonist shaped by history, grief, and personal code. The role demanded gravity, restraint, and physical authenticity, qualities Lee had honed over decades of disciplined training and thoughtful role selection. Every movement, expression, and pause was intentional, reflecting a performer who had mastered the art of presence over mere spectacle. This role marked a full-circle moment in Lee's career. In the early 1990s, he had portrayed Bruce Lee, a living legend whose life he honored through rigorous preparation and sensitivity. Now, decades later, he embodied a fictional warrior whose authority and depth resonated with modern audiences. It was proof that screen presence deepens with experience, and that an actor's craft matures over time, not just in visibility but in intention. Beyond the performance itself, Lee's return in Mulan symbolized a larger truth. His career has always been about more than fame or box office numbers. It has been about representation, integrity, and storytelling that matters. From honoring cultural icons to exploring complex characters, Lee's body of work demonstrates that impact can outlast the spotlight. Through Khan, audiences were reminded why Jason Scott. Lee remains a distinctive presence in cinema. He is not defined by trends, celebrity, or the fleeting pressures of Hollywood. He is defined by discipline, authenticity, and a deliberate commitment to meaningful storytelling, qualities that continue to set him apart as one of the few actors capable of bridging entertainment with cultural significance. For Jasonscottlee, every role has always carried purpose. And in Mulan, that purpose was unmistakable. A career built on integrity, craft, and representation can resonate far beyond the screen. Interesting trivias. Training for Bruce Lee. Jasonscottlee was not a lifelong martial artist before filming Dragon, the Bruce Lee story, 1993. He underwent intense martial arts training, studying Jeet Kune Do principles and Bruce Lee's philosophy to embody his movements and mindset authentically. Endorsement by Linda Lee Cadwell, Bruce Lee's widow, supported Lee's casting and praised a commitment to honoring Bruce Lee's legacy. Disney milestone. In 1994, Lee became one of the few Asian actors to lead a major Disney live-action film with The Jungle Book, playing Mowgli, a role that combined athleticism, emotional nuance, and authenticity. Cultural films. Lee deliberately chose roles that explored culture and history, such as Rapa Nui, 1994, portraying a Polynesian warrior navigating tradition and leadership. Independent and international work. Beyond Hollywood, Lee appeared in independent films and international productions, prioritizing meaningful storytelling over commercial visibility. Martial arts philosophy. Even outside of roles, Lee has maintained a deep interest in martial arts philosophy, integrating discipline, focus, and physical storytelling into his craft. Full circle in Mulan. In Disney's Mulan 2020, Lee returned to a global audience as Khan, a seasoned warrior. This role demonstrated his evolution as a performer and his continued focus on complex, authentic characters. Representation advocate. Throughout his career, Lee avoided stereotypical roles when possible and chose projects that offered positive, nuanced representation for Asian actors in Hollywood. Jasonscottlee's career has never been defined by the number of films he made or the volume of headlines he generated. Instead, it has been shaped by intention, discipline, and authenticity. He arrived at a time when Asian actors were often invisible in Hollywood. Yet he consistently chose roles that honored culture, explored humanity, and challenged stereotypes. From embodying Bruce Lee, a global icon, to bringing Mowgli to life, to exploring Polynesian history in Rapa Nui, and finally returning as a commanding presence in Mulan, Lee consistently pushed boundaries while staying true to himself. His legacy is quiet but enduring. He showed that a leading man can command the screen without spectacle, without compromise, and that authenticity can be more powerful than fame. For young actors, for audiences, and for Hollywood itself, he proved that representation, craft, and integrity matter, And that true impact is measured not by attention, but by influence. Jasonscottlee's journey reminds us that some stars don't just shine, they leave a mark. Cinema Uncovered,